So, top 5 games of all time. Let's talk about it. So this video is in response to the video that Darkovic did outlining her top 5 games of all time, in which she tagged everybody in the end. So I guess, I'm free to do one. So, disclaimer, a lot of these games will be RPGs. I grew up in the 90s. They were very prevalent on the PlayStation and the Super Nintendo. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to count down from 5. My 5th game of all time. My 5th game of all time is Resident Evil. This game was my introduction to the survival horror genre, and it was actually one of the first games that I actually couldn't play by myself. I had actually started by watching my older brother and my older sister play, and the first few minutes of that game had me underneath my blankets, refusing to look at the screen. Since then, fortunately, I've grown a backbone, and I've been able to play all of the other survival horror games that have come out since then, and to this day, it holds up. A lot of the dank corridors from that game, not knowing what was around the corner, from hearing the footsteps of the zombies, all of that stuff holds up to this day, and I stick by it. My number 4 game of all time is Last of Us. The writing, the graphics, the gameplay was just incredible, and it was the first time that I was on the edge of my seat pretty much the entire game, and I cared about the characters. I was on the verge of, tears every time something happened to the characters in the story, and, it was kind of like this rush of emotion and adrenaline all throughout the game, and I thought it was incredible. My number 3 game is going to be a combination, okay? It starts off as Elder Scrolls Oblivion, okay, and by proxy it includes Skyrim and Fallout, and that was the first time I actually kind of took control of player narrative, and it was the first time that I had fully enjoyed role-playing as a character that I chose. So I role-played as a specific character in those games, and I stuck to that character all throughout the game, and I enjoyed making decisions on my own and creating my own sort of self-narrative from all of the decisions I was making, from all the quests I was doing, and from all of the conversations that I had with all of the NPCs and characters, all the way down to, Knights of the Nine, and traveling down the hill with all of the knights, and being together with them and invading the forces of evil. And it was just one of those games where, you could create your own character, be your own character, role play as that character, and kind of for once own the decisions you made instead of kind of ride along on this linear ride. Which brings me to my top 2. So my second game of all time is Suikoden, and that game was just incredible. First of all, it had 108 characters that you could recruit and use in your party, and that was the first time that I had actually ventured into GameFAQ land and looked for information about characters to recruit, because there were so many characters to choose from, and I needed to experience all of them. I needed to know if there was a character that I was going to fall in love here or there, and so that was also the first time that I had gone around and looked for special characters, and a lot of the characters stood out on their own, and meeting them out in the world, there was always some kind of incentive or motivation that kind of took over, where you saw a colorful character that you thought would play a huge role in your kind of greater cause, and recruiting them became your number 1 priority. And sometimes you couldn't even recruit them the first time you met them. Sometimes you had to go deeper into the story and make things happen from there, in which they would kind of meet you later on in the story. And so it was definitely a journey in itself, recruiting all 108 of these characters. And then there was the war games that happened, where you had these little tiny little people travel on the ground, just going la, 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 and you chose certain battle tactics to go against each other, and then they would all battle out like little ants on in a field, and they would all just like kill each other, and it was entertaining. It is one of the most memorable RPG experiences of my life. Number one game of all time, that's gonna be Chrono Trigger. And if you're an RPG player or a JRPG fan, you know exactly why this is my number one game of all time, and I don't have much to explain, and I don't have to say much. The writing was amazing, the story was incredible, and the character development was pretty incredible, and I cared about all of those characters from the moment I met them. And it was also one of the first JRPGs to kind of break from mold and introduce you to a different type of way to traverse the environment. You weren't kind of sequestered into this just world where there was random encounters all over the place. You could actually see your enemies, and you can actually avoid them completely. And you know, that was a first back then for a lot of JRPGs, and that's why it holds up to this day, because there are RPGs today that still use the random encounter mechanic, and I thought this was ahead of its time. And so that's my top 5 games of all time. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know what your top 5 games of all time are, and if you agree with any of my selections. Like and subscribe this video, and I'll see you guys later.